Hello, my name is Kay, and this is the K Touch where art meets conversation. And I am excited today to have Shanti Hershenson on the podcast. Shanti has a very unique gift. She is a writer and she's an advocate. She has a lot of books under her belt, and one of those is You Won't Know Her Name, which basically talks about bullying and the experience surrounding that. Shanti has been writing for quite a long time. She's been writing since she was 12. She also performs on open mic nights, talking about her poem Needles and Thorns. Shanti is going to be telling us all about that and any other future plans she has. Welcome, Shanti, to the K Touch.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is so good to have you here. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. You are an amazing, an extraordinary young lady. First impressions. I search for you online. I see how massive your following on TikTok is, the number of books that you have published. It's all blowing my mind, even as we speak. So please, I'm going to be picking your brain on a few things, and how you've gone this far, and your journey as a writer and an advocate. But let us start with how it all began. I know you've been asked this over and over again, but before Shanti became this wonderful author and this speaker, how was it for you?
Ooh, okay. So I'll start with the easy answer. Is
Okay.
that I've loved writing for as long as I can remember. I probably started writing when I was maybe around 5,
Okay.
and it was always something that I really loved. My handwriting's quite bad, and at that time we didn't really have like computers as we do now.
Yeah.
So I would end up scribbling a lot of different stories. You know, often mainly because my handwriting wasn't that great.
Yeah.
I would just draw these pictures, and the pictures would tell a story, or I would draw pictures in a few words. And then as I grew older and I started using a computer, then I was able to really write so much more. However, with that being said, I don't think I was particularly anything special when I was a kid when it came to writing. I produced all kinds of crazy stories, but the writing, I mean, I don't know. I look back and I'm like, oh, well, my writing was not that good, but I mean, that was because I was in elementary school. So, you know, it's more that I just had this passion and I had the motivation to improve. And then
Hmm.
what happened is, well, two things happened. The first was when I was in the 6th grade, me and my friend together, we wrote these little novellas. And that was the point when I was really starting to understand like what made good writing and what I needed to do to really add details to my writing in really sort of form sentences that weren't just very choppy. So at 11 years old, me and my friend wrote these 2 novellas, and we really wanted to get printed copies of them. And I thought at the time that the only way to do that was to go on Amazon and
Mhm.
self-publish, which is
Yeah.
obviously, I mean, there are plenty of ways you can do that, but that's what worked for me.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I just published a book. And it really didn't, I didn't really realize that until the book was on Amazon. Nonetheless, those were my first books. I jumped between counting them and not counting them because, I mean, they're like 50 pages
Hmm.
and I was 11, but that's what laid the groundwork and created that skill set to both be able to publish, but also be able to like write and edit more efficiently. So
Well,
then we'll.
sorry, I'm just going to
Oh, no
interrupt
worries,
you a
no
bit.
worries.
Just are
Yeah,
those books still on Amazon?
they are. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Well, yeah. So you publish these books and they're still on Amazon. I've written I've written just two books or so, and I keep fighting myself between leaving them as they are and taking them out because obviously I have grown as a writer. But you've left them there. Is there some part of you that wants to keep them there as a kind of reminder of where you started from, or is there something more to it be still being on Amazon?
Yeah, I think in some ways it's almost this like relic of like where I started. And I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, the same goes for so much of my older work. And I
Hmm.
mean, my older work after that is a million times better. But still, even my older work, sometimes I'm like, oh, well, I could do so much better now. But then I'm undermining the ideas that like my 12-year-old self had.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
it would almost be better to let my readers experience the story as I intended when I had the idea and when I was actually like experiencing things that inspired the story, or when I was actually really, really, really obsessed with all the characters rather than just going in as like an older and in some ways completely different person and being like,
Hmm.
actually, we need to change this. Because then I'm
Yeah.
just
Good
completely like, it
point.
would be completely different, but it wouldn't have that same charm to it.
That's a good point, actually. Thanks for saying that because now I've just pulled off one of my books from Amazon. So with you saying this, I think I'm going to put it back the way it is, just put it in its raw form. Um, okay, we're going to get to some point your journey as a as a speaker and as a writer, particularly with this particular book. But allow me to ask, your confidence. You're really a confident person. Where is that all coming from?
In many ways, it has come from being a teen author because
Hmm.
it is, it is a completely different thing that just most teenagers don't experience this.
Yeah.
Sorry, she just minimized my screen.
I think a lot of my audience would actually find that quite adorable. So please
Here,
let her do her
here,
thing.
why don't you come in frame? Yeah, so anyways, I was not at all confident when I started out. I mean, part of the reason was obviously because I was in 6th grade. I was
Yeah.
in 6th grade when I published those 2 books, but I was also in 6th grade when I started writing my first novel.
Okay.
And at the time, I was this shy kid. I had moved from LA to San Diego a couple
Okay.
months before the pandemic, so
Hmm.
I didn't really have friends. I was just like so getting used to this new environment. And I mean, my whole life I've been just a little bit shy.
Hmm.
So what happened, I think, was just that experience of being a teen author, of like publishing my books and having to then talk about them and market them. And, when I was younger, I used to go to the bookstore and try to introduce myself. And coupled with that, there's also this new sense of like online confidence
Yeah.
because, and this was, this is a thing that started back in, say, like 2021, when that's when I felt like I was starting to like pick up traction,
Yeah.
just slightly compared to what I have now. And at that time, there were still no in-person events. So also a lot of my confidence came not exactly from speaking, but just from having to like present myself as a
Hmm.
person online,
Yeah.
and not just like a, 9-year-old making YouTube videos, because that's what I did for a while, but actually as me with my real name and my face. And that kind of taught me a lot about like, okay, well, who do I want to be? But also,
Hmm.
and then along with that too, I've had to do so many podcast interviews, and I mean, I hear myself like in my first ever podcast video, or not video, interview, and I'm so shy. I'm like, and I can't really like talk, and I'm just like trying to like pretend like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then also now I do in-person events, some where
Hmm.
I have a whole talk and I have to talk for like 30 minutes, or I had one where I literally talked for I think an hour just in front of an audience, and it was cool because they were just there for me. Or I've had some where I've had to answer questions live on a panel. But I've also had some events, and I think these have definitely been the ones where you have to just grow your confidence the
Well,
most.
that's fantastic
Yeah.
because you're almost causing me to throw away every question that I have here just to focus on your experience as a speaker. But I guess your story and your experience goes to show that practice. This is clear evidence that practice does make perfect. Because I this is you seem like you're just oozing out all of that experience, all of that confidence. So that's just phenomenal. But let's talk about you as a writer. What authors would you say or books have kind of guided or inspired you the most in your journey? Can you give us a few examples?
Ooh, good question. I have like several different books that are definitely my favorite books, and I think each book
Okay.
taught me a different thing about
Hmm.
what it is to write. For example, I really love the Grishaverse series by Lee Bardugo. She's my favorite author, and it's my favorite book
Okay.
series. But specifically in Six of Crows, there's this really great development of all of these different characters,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
they all feel so real, and they all have these complex backstories, and all of their traumas kind of sort of interact and work
Yeah.
together. And it really taught me like, okay, so when I create characters, I need my characters to be not just these like even just the side characters. They can't just be things that like are people that move the story forward. They have to be their own people as well, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Another
Yep.
book,
Yep.
probably my favorite book of all time, is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. And that
Oh.
book really felt like sort of a lesson in like, okay, how do I approach difficult topics, but at the same time also how to write a character that feels extremely real. This goes more
Hmm.
for contemporary than like science fiction or fantasy.
Yep. Yep.
Is it like when I write a character who's in like high school, or who's young, or even just a character who's very human and on Earth in this period, then it has to have a certain level of realism to it,
Hmm.
or else it's not going to feel as special.
Yep.
and as like
And as
memorable.
authentic as you would want it to
Yeah.
be. Yes, I completely understand that. That's amazing. Okay, that's good to know your backstory in terms of your inspiration, because I know you do dive into a number of genres, and I think, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's all for you. This is an exciting moment, and it's about experiencing all of these. And who knows, maybe as you keep writing more, you might then, which sounds a bit sad to say, I don't know, focus more on one genre. But right now you're just enjoying all of these, and it's just a wonderful experience. Am I getting that right with you, or?
Yeah, it's kind of in many ways I don't know. I think on
Mm.
one hand, like I love jumping between genres. I at this point I can't imagine myself settling down on one. Though I have my core
Ooh,
genres that
okay.
are like my favorites. Those are the ones I always go back to.
Okay, well, that's cool. So let's can you tell us a bit about Needles and Thorns? I know, we're going to be talking about You Won't Know Her Name, but Needles and Thorns, I know, is basically a poem you've written as a result of your experiences. But take us through the journey of how that was written. Um,
Ooh, Needles and Thorns. Okay, that is a very deep cut. Shanti
oh, I'm
Hershenson
sorry, I'm
work.
sorry, but I
No,
just
no, 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 no. It's in my bio.
okay.
It's in my old bio. Yeah. It's Ooh, I'm trying to figure out where to go with this. So, Needles and Thorns was probably the first like spoken word poem I wrote that
Hmm.
I actually genuinely loved and was like, this is not just a poem. This is a bunch of
There's
words
a
that I
part
wrote that
of you,
express, yeah, it's
yes.
a part of me, it's a bunch of words I wrote that like express how I'm feeling. And I believe I wrote Needles and Thorns. I know it was in seventh grade. It was probably like in the middle of seventh grade. I also remember that it was for a school project, and after that, I got a call home from the principal.
Oh,
Um,
oh, can you tell us a bit about that?
yeah, of course. I mean, it's okay. Needles and Thorns is very much a poem pointing out not only the problems in just school in general, and especially, I mean, middle school,
Hmm.
but it was a poem also that was a sort of call out of the issues pertaining to my school.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Wow.
it was one that I chose to do for a school project. So I remember I had to do a recording as part of it. And
Hmm.
then like I remember I had like an instrumental. It was all very fun. In terms of the writing process, I'm like trying my best to remember because it's been so long. But I believe I really, I sat down, I was like, okay, I want to write a poem about this. It
Hmm.
is going to evoke these emotions, and mainly because I think that was part of the project is I had to like invoke some kind of emotion.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
then I really just it just happened.
Hmm.
It wasn't one of those poems that I remember having to like sit down and really, really, really think out. It was
Hmm.
also like the second or third poem I'd ever written in my life. So
Well, now that you've mentioned, because I was going to go to that at some point, but you've pushed me to it. In terms of the school support for um, people who are experiencing or have experienced bullying, I know you're really a strong advocate for anti-bullying. What would you say, from your experience and from what you've captured so far, has there been a change with regards to the approach and the support that students have from teachers? I mean, from the best of your knowledge, I know obviously from region to region and from school to school, it might be different, but what's your general vibe?
I mean, I think that in many ways we do seem to repeat these patterns.
Hmm.
Like I think it's and I've been to many different schools. And it really depends school by school because a
Hmm.
lot of it depends on like the philosophy of the school and
Yeah.
handling things. A lot of it
Hmm.
depends on whether the school has the ability to expel and suspend students.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in that regard, it's like it truthfully depends.
Okay.
And I've been in some environments where like, yeah, there's no problem. Others where it's is a dumpster fire and it may still very well be. I'm just not there to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I mean, that says a lot about aspects of this that need to be focused on, and a culture change towards these things. I mean, I've heard you say, or in other podcasts, how when certain complaints are made, there's this kind of conversation or saying where it's what is expected for middle school, or that's how you'd expect students to behave or how they treat each other. But it's like a lack of acceptance that could have a significant traumatic experience with the child moving forward. So yeah.
Yeah, there's really a lack of like interest in handling
Mm,
these issues almost because as a society, um, and I don't know if this goes for other countries, but at least in America,
mm,
we really have this idea of how middle school is supposed to be. And it's like,
mm.
it's going to be terrible. It's the worst years of your life. And in that way, the fact that, we've kind of ingrained these ideas into our society and then therefore into the philosophies we use to,
Yeah.
you know, govern schools,
Wow.
it really is it's just a cycle that keeps going.
It is a cycle that keeps going. Well, I'm hoping that it does change at some point. Let's talk about now. I'm going to look at You Won't Know Her Name. I read this book and it hit me on different levels in terms of the kind of emotions it provokes, how raw it was. Um, but as I'm sure you've heard from a number of people who've read it as well, it does take people back to similar experiences they've had. So honestly, kudos for that. Um, but let me ask, was there a specific moment or experience that sparked the creation of this book? So, it one of those, oh, I'm going to write a book about bullying or my experiences of bullying in one way or shape? Or was it one of those, you know what, this particular experience, I'm not going to let slide. I must find a way of documenting it.
It was definitely a mix of all of that.
Hmm.
I mean, to kind of put it in perspective, I was 13 when I wrote You Won't Know Her Name. I was 11 and 12 when
Okay.
the events happened.
Happened.
There was maybe about a year. It was maybe a year and a half after that I wrote it.
Hmm.
And particularly, it wasn't a book I ever thought I was going to write. It is I can say it now much more confidently than I could a couple of years ago that really for the most part it is a true story.
Wow.
I always say for the most part because it in many ways, memory doesn't work like
Yeah,
that where I can
yeah, yeah,
perfectly
yeah.
recollect something. So
Mm-hmm,
I'm like
mm-hmm,
it could be over dramatized. I know there are things I left out.
mm,
There are incidents that happened in that span of time that I didn't include in the story. There are maybe events that were kind of moved around. But either way, the general consensus of it and just the things that happen.
happened. Yeah,
It's just a matter of when they happened
yeah.
and yeah, like but yeah, for the most part, it tells a pretty and it is pretty linear. Like this happened.
Mm.
And I didn't think I was ever going to write it, mainly because I didn't quite understand the experience
Yeah,
myself.
you were quite young, still
Yeah,
processing a lot of these emotions.
I think it's like, and especially in You Own Her Name, and I'm trying to remember because it's actually been a minute since I reread that book. That's not one I usually reread.
Mm,
Um, in You Own Her Name, the girl, the character, she doesn't necessarily understand. She's like, oh, this is bad. This happened to me because of this TV show I liked.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that was really how I felt for a really long time. I was like, oh, someone was mean to me because I liked this show and they didn't. And it genuinely probably wasn't until a year later and more stuff started to come out that I was like, wait,
No, yeah. There's
it's so
something
much
really
deeper than
wrong
that.
about this. Mm-hmm.
And it's so much more than this like generic bullying instance. It's so much deeper than that. And I
Mm,
think once I realized that, then I was like, okay, so that's messed up. But I tried approaching You Own Her Name in a multitude of different ways. I have I have many first chapters in my
mm,
Google Drive of different ways I tried to write the book, different
okay.
sort of formats, different openings, and none of them worked. And it wasn't until I took a little bit more of a vague approach with it, and when I started writing poetry,
Yeah.
also because poetry was such a huge part of that story
Mm,
that I was sort of able to weave together this story that, yes, in many ways was about me, but was also about this general idea of like this is what's going on in our schools. But
mm,
kind of circling back to what you said earlier, it was also very much I need to document this. I need someone to
yeah.
know this happened because I don't feel like people are listening to me. And I don't in some ways I don't feel like the people that I've told, like, yeah, they're like, oh, that's terrible, but
Mm.
no
What else?
one
Yeah, yeah,
truly
yeah, yeah.
understands.
Wow. And what I really loved about the whole approach, choosing poetry over prose, is in no way I couldn't even think of a better way for such a book to be written. It just seemed like the only way in which it could be expressed, and then setting as an example for others who might be going through a similar situation on how to cope. It's a way to guide them to express their emotions and their experiences in a way that's raw and real, and relatable. So yeah, I can't imagine. When I picked the book up initially, I didn't know it was going to be in the form of a poetry. It was written in the form of poetry, but then I began to read it, and then it was like, yeah, this actually makes sense. Okay, but I'm going to read an excerpt, and I want, with your permission, I just want to know your thoughts. Not when you wrote them, but even now as I read this.
Yeah, of course.
Um, so this is the girl, she's just experienced an incident, and she's processing it at the end of the day. So it starts lying awake. The girl lies awake that same night, her thoughts racing about the day she had and the next one too. She doesn't know what to do. She has earbuds plugged into her ears, playing a song, but she's too anxious to hear the music. The girl used to email her teachers a lot when she was stressed or worried, but never for an occasion like this. And when her bedtime passes and she still can't sleep, she sends an email with the subject, "I am terrified." And one sentence that says, "I am just really, really afraid that they will hurt me again." Explanation needed. The girl wakes up early the next day, but she doesn't want to get out of bed, for she knows who she'll have to see, and that she'll have to speak and explain what happened to her, even if she doesn't fully understand. Tell me about your thoughts as I read this excerpt.
Yeah, of course. So let's see. I think it's really interesting having the girl sort of, sometimes I'm like, oh, what music was she listening to?
Hmm.
But yeah, it's like, there's this feeling when you're so anxious when something happened to you and maybe you really don't understand it. So in a way, I wonder if, she's trying to work through it in her head. She's trying to like figure out what happened and her thoughts are so loud that she can't hear the music. In
Hmm.
terms of the next chapter, that one's really funny to me because those are excerpts from an email I wrote. So
Oh,
those were straight from the inbox.
wow.
But yeah, I also thought that including it is a very good example of like, look, she's really young. She's like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm just really, really scared, and even the subject line, "I am terrified," because that's
Yeah,
a pretty crazy subject line to
it is
receive.
a terrible. Yeah, it's a start as an email. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a really interesting sort of display of like how young she is. And then in
Hmm.
terms of the poem following too, it's like, there's this knowing that she's going to come to school and she's going to have to explain herself.
Yes.
She's going to have to go over these events over and over. She's going to have to, basically put everything that happened to her in the hands of someone else to deal with. And although, of course, she doesn't know how that's going to go, I think just from, my experience is that, yeah, I'd been bullied before. I had to tell the teacher before. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. And
Hmm.
I think there's this sort of like, knowing with her of like, I don't know if I fully trust these people to help
Yeah.
me. And then also, in terms of this emphasis that she doesn't understand, in hindsight, like how hard must it have been to be like, hey, this happened to me. I don't know how to explain this because it's not actually one incident and I don't even know why it's happening.
Hmm.
So then to have to like then go and explain something and try to make sense of it,
Hmm.
it's just so challenging.
Yeah, and I was really amazed as well. I'll still come back to the book, but there were excerpts of the book where even the teachers in would not seem to have a clue how to solve the problem, but then put the pressure back on the victim in in their attempts to solve it. The victim would still feel, or the lady in question would feel pressured, at times, for instance, where she would have to speak against the bully or in front of the bully. and express herself, how uncomfortable that was, and not having that safe space, and having to, for instance, leave to use the restroom quite often because she just couldn't express herself, but the teachers wanted her to do so. For someone who was quite young, that was really tough to read. But yeah, thanks for expressing that. It's as though you gave voice, or giving voice to people who were going through the same things. But let me ask again about, um, would you feel like, the silence, that there's an idea to the silence? So there's a lot of aspects where she doesn't say anything at all. What is the significance to this, of this, to you as a writer?
For me, the silence is very much both just representative of what it was like.
Hmm.
In many ways, that she's silent because she had her voice taken, and because all of a sudden, she's in this
Yeah.
new place with new people. And first off, when you have these things happen to you, it can feel like your voice is taken. You feel like you don't know what to do, or I mean, in some ways, in my case, I really wanted to speak up about it. So it's both this simultaneous fight of like I want to speak up about it, but I feel like I don't have a voice. And at the same time, her voice is being taken not by the person, but by like the systems in her school
Yeah.
and by
Yeah.
the adults in power who aren't helping her. And in telling her like, oh, it's just middle school, that's taking away her voice. That's taking
Hmm.
away her, perspective and her
Yes.
feelings, and that's taking away like the viewpoint of the person who actually experienced it, rather than just the adult who's watching it happen.
Hmm. Okay. Wow. And then tell us a bit about um the reason why she doesn't have a name, um and your style of writing, and says, oh, this person, or the person, and all of that. Tell us about that.
Of course, there are two main reasons for that. The first one, which is much more prevalent, is just that it allows you to really put yourself into the character.
Hmm.
Because in many ways, You Won't Know Her Name is not supposed to be this story with this distinct character that has this really detailed personality. She's a person, but she's also not. She's All of the characters in You Won't Know Her Name are sort of these placeholders, and I think that when
Yeah.
the reader is experiencing the story, or reading the story, it's a lot more of an experience. It's like an interaction,
Hmm.
and they're putting themselves, without knowing it, into the places of the characters, or they're putting that person they knew that was horrible into the place of the person. And
Yeah.
it really allows it to become not just a general book about bullying, but something that's a lot more universal.
Yeah.
Um, and the other reason, half of a reason was it didn't feel right for me. I couldn't make it work if I used my name or a new name, or if I changed any names. The other reason that I chose to put no one's names is because I published that book when I was still at the school where it happened.
Oh,
And
wow.
all of the characters in that book were still people who were actively a part of my life, or who I knew and who I saw on a daily basis. So,
Wow.
in that regard, it was like it couldn't have happened. And if, because there's a level of like anonymity to it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah. Yeah.
really
Yeah.
helps
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
hide. It not helps me hide, but it makes it, less about the people and more about the idea.
Yep.
It also
Yep.
wouldn't put me into danger or get me into trouble.
Did you feel that, did you at any point in time have conversations, if you don't mind me asking, about the book with any of the people in real life that it was represented, or was that always just this, less elephant in the room nobody wants to engage
Oh,
with?
at my old school, You Won't Know Her Name was absolutely an elephant in the room. All of the students, so many of the students knew about it, and maybe they'd
Hmm.
heard, maybe I'd told them what happened to me. I was very vocal when I was 12. I was in many ways, I was like, this happened to me, this is not okay. I think that was
Yeah.
also partially because I just didn't understand how crazy it was,
Hmm.
that I felt brave enough to talk about it.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, because a lot of students had similar things happen to them, so it was sort of this book that was like passed around. However, the people mainly in the story, no, I
Okay.
never spoke with them about it.
Okay.
One of them reviewed it 1 star on Goodreads, but didn't say anything. Just gave me a 1 star, and I was like, okay, that's fine. Um,
Wow.
but yeah, it was always this subtle tension at my school. Like, okay, I did this. I, most people are really proud of me. Not everyone is. But that's okay. It's like that was the choice that I had to make to publish the
Yeah.
book, and honestly, I think it really made my middle school experience just a tad bit better because it gave me that
Yeah.
power. Also, I got in 8th grade, I got voted most likely to be a best-selling author, and I held that book in my yearbook picture. So You Won't Know Her Name is literally forever in my school's yearbook.
Wow. I like what you just said now about how expressing yourself in that way kind of got you back some power and some control. And that's just phenomenal. I think having these kinds of communications through written media or whatever does inspire confidence, and you're the one in control of your story. So I completely get that. What kind of conversations do you think this would spark amongst readers? So, not people. Well, I'm 42 this year, but especially amongst young adults and people who would be more who would be exposed to this in school.
At, with among young adults, at least I hope that there is this sort of conversation arising among people who read the book that, like, okay, it doesn't have to be this way.
Hmm.
Like, You Won't Know Her Name is in many ways a sad story, but it doesn't have to be a sad story. I
Yep.
personally think the book ends on a good note. It ends on a better note than it did in
It
real life.
does. It
Yeah.
does actually.
Yeah,
I
it's like it
agree.
ends on this idea of like, well, change can come, you can rise above the storm. And I think if more people also see that part of the book and realize like, hey, this is terrible, but this means that we can change things. It doesn't
Hmm.
have to be this way. And I think that's probably, of all of the messages in You Won't Know Her Name, of all of its bluntness and all of just the, crazy shock factor things that happen in it, the real message is it doesn't have to be like this. And
Hmm.
it shouldn't have to be.
Yeah, and I think for me, my hope, at least the way it's impacted me, is to speak up more when people are experiencing bullying. I mean, I don't think I still experience bullying from time to time, and it's just the nature of life. But I've learned, I think it's come with age and just experience how to handle it. But for other people, I think it's really important if I were to find myself in a situation where people are being bullied, to actually stand to defend them in that situation. The easier thing to do is to let it happen and then comfort them afterwards, but to be there presently defending people who would not be otherwise able to defend themselves is really important. So thanks for that, and the message from that. How did you choose what parts of the narrator's story, well, your experience, to include and what to leave? Because you said that there are aspects of the book that you have not put, well, aspects of the story of your experience that aren't in the book. How did you pick the ones to include and the ones to exclude?
It wasn't a very thoughtful process. It was more
Okay.
that I sat down to write the book and recall everything.
Okay.
And it wasn't actually until after it was published that I was like, oh, I forgot about that.
Okay.
Because, that's kind of the trick with memory, is it's like
Mm,
sometimes, especially when something traumatic happens, you don't necessarily remember anything.
mm,
But yeah, it was also mainly I wanted to capture the most of what would be, in some ways it's like, okay, I wanted to capture what would be I'm trying to say like inspiring and motivational, but
mm.
those are not the right words. But
Yeah,
it's what would be
yeah.
powerful more so than the whole story. It's not that I cut anything out from really
Yeah.
intentionally from the part actual from the book. It's just that it ends on the poetry reading.
Mm.
That's
It does.
not where the story ends
Actually
in
ends,
real
yeah.
life. In many ways, though, I mean, after there's the big incidents, that's where the actual bullying ends. But that's not where all of the really sort of the really big things in the story
Mm.
end. That's
Actually
not
end, yeah.
where the story of me in middle school ends. It's just that
Mm.
that was the note I wanted to end on. I
Yeah,
mean, also partially that was because the story wasn't over when I wrote You Won't Know Her Name.
yeah.
You Won't Know Her Name
Okay.
is a part of this larger story.
Yes, I heard that there's another one you're working on at the moment that might. Okay, I'm not going to go into that, but I'm quite excited about that as well. So was there anything in the book that you felt too raw to write at first? So I want to know if whilst you were writing it, the level of comfort you felt expressing some themes in there.
Definitely, I mean, I was 13 when I wrote it. So many of those topics were things that I was like, I don't know how I'm going to approach this. That's
Hmm.
also partially the reason why there are trigger warnings in front of every poem,
Yeah.
because it's so personal that I'm like, I don't know how to actually approach this. One, just because this is nothing like anything I've ever written before.
Mm.
And I mean, in some ways, I'm going off of experience. That's better than just like making it up. But
Yeah.
it's still like I don't know how to write these in a way that is comfortable and in a way that isn't going to like be upsetting. I mean, of course, the book is upsetting. But I was in the end, I also had to consult with you know, I'm trying to figure out how to say it, like other people who are
Yeah.
featured in the story, family members, other people who'd experienced
Mm.
it, because those things like I can't get those wrong. I can't get those
Yeah.
experiences wrong. And in some ways, the actual story is worse than what happens in You Own Her Name. In some ways, maybe it's better.
Mm.
It was just a matter of recollection and also
Yeah.
like consulting with the people to be like, hey, can I put this in here? How do you want me to put this in here? Also, though, there were countless times throughout the writing of that book where I was like, I shouldn't be doing this. This is terrible. Like, this is
Really?
nothing good is going to come out of this book. Like, it was
Wow.
genuinely, I had every single day I woke up telling myself, don't do it. Don't go write. Don't go write You Own Her Name.
Oh,
And
wow.
it just sort of happened. Like, I kept telling myself, don't do it. This is a terrible idea. And even still, I kept on writing. And I
Mm.
think that was the real sign that I was like, okay, well, if I can't stop writing it, then clearly this is a book that needs to be out in the world.
I like that. I like that because that in a way also mirrors some of my experiences as well when I want to start a project. There are times when I think about projects and I say to myself, you know what, do I really want to do this? And that's where I go into a mind state where I start giving myself reasons. I go for the pros and versus the cons so I can really find out what I'm afraid of. So why don't I want to write it? And sometimes I find out that it's because I'm afraid of what people will think about me, how people will reflect on the book, on the project. But I'm glad you went ahead to express it because only good has come out of it at the end of the day. So yeah, well done for overcoming whatever it is you needed to. So what has been? Can you share a bit about the reactions from people who've read it? I mean, you've not just put the book out for reading, you've also done book signings and all of that. I've seen a few of those pictures. What's the general reaction you've gotten from people?
I think the most common thing is what you said earlier. It brings people back to their middle school years. But also I've heard that it does help people to read this book. You know, because it really
Hmm.
does show them they're not alone. Like, and I think these feelings and these experiences can feel so isolating.
Yes.
And so just to teach someone like, hey, you're not the only one that's gone through this, and also that it's going to be okay. You
Hmm.
know, if I'm okay, then you'll be okay too. But it's hard.
Yeah. And okay, I'm going to read a few, but I need to circle back to the support you received, because I think it's good that people who are experiencing this kind of bullying and harassment have support, but then you have to think of what kind of support should they be receiving from parents, from family members, to know what kind of roles to play. I'm a father, I've got two daughters, so this it'll be nice to know what I can do to help someone that might be experiencing this. But let me read a few reviews for you. So this is from people who bought the book, and one person says, I love this book, and as a former middle school teacher, I think it's truly imperative that others read too. Bullying wasn't around much when I attended school. She's talking about herself, but it's rampant nowadays, and kids need to know that they are not alone in suffering through these horrible situations. It could be the open doorway to discussing these issues in the classroom setting, such an important work of a troublesome topic. That's one reviewer. I'll read a couple more. Someone else said, I love all the poetry. The story was so sad and touching, and I could relate to some of the not so intense parts. I really enjoy the message of not being silenced. And then one more. Now this is just, there's a lot of reviews on this, but one says that it's a powerful story told in poetry by a brave young author who really bears her heart in these pages. Shanti's words transported me back to my own middle school days and made me wish I had a friend like her to get through it. What do you think?
It's all very surreal hearing this, but
Mm.
it's also, I mean, in many ways, that's why I write, is that I
Mm.
can connect with people and I can like really impact people rather than just, selling a book and making money. Like, it's so
Hmm.
much more personal than that. And You Won't Know Her Name is truly about as personal as it gets.
Yeah.
Because now not only am I really like the reviewer said, bearing my heart and sharing my story, but then people are sharing their stories too.
Yeah.
And it's like that's genuinely some of like the most that's like it's just such a beautiful connection.
Hmm. It's good. It's really good. So you go around as well, and you going to schools, I imagine, spreading the message and being an advocate for anti-bullying. Please tell us a bit about that, your advocacy.
Yeah, I perform a lot of poetry.
Hmm.
It's so much of my advocacy is really um like linked to the writing. It is
Okay.
really my form of advocacy is writing
Okay.
and talking
Yeah.
about it.
Okay.
I more so back then than I do now. I go to a lot of open mic nights and I perform a poem, and maybe I share a little bit of my story. Maybe I wouldn't, in any
Hmm.
ways the poem kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And I'd also, I talk about it on podcasts a lot. I
Yeah.
try to be pretty open. I try to, and I use social media. Again, much less now than I did then, just because it was so much more prevalent to my life then than it is
Hmm.
now. But it's still something I really try to keep close, and I try to, it's probably one of the highest issues. Like it's probably one of the biggest issues I care about.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about your journey. Now, the story you've written reflects your journey, but you have grown past that, and well, you are growing past that, and you're writing a lot more and engaging more with books and that. Tell me about TikTok and this explosion, and all your followers on there, and how you were able to connect with them.
Yeah, of course. So I again, actually, back to You Won't Know Her Name. That was when I made a TikTok account. Was when I was publishing that book.
Hmm.
And I don't. It wasn't exactly related to that. It was more that just like, okay, I needed a time to create a TikTok, and I was like, you know what? I just need to do it. And the
Hmm.
first video I ever made was about You Won't Know Her Name. And yeah, it has been so rewarding. I think what makes TikTok so unique, at least for me being a young adult author, is that first off, I get to connect with people around my age, but second, I get to connect with the people who are actually the ones reading my books. So
Yeah.
it's like it provides me with this really direct connection rather than just, I'm marketing on Facebook and maybe the parents will buy the book for them. Like I'm actually like really talking to the people that I have in mind when I'm writing my books.
Yeah. 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 So you've mentioned parents. Can I talk a bit about? Can you talk a bit about the role um, that your parents have played in getting you past a lot of these issues, and what parents can do generally to support their children?
Yeah, I mean, my parents have been incredibly supportive, both with writing and all of the crazy things that have happened to me. It's really important for parents just, to be there to listen, to like, because you need someone to talk to. And sometimes, when you're being bullied, it can be hard to find people in your school circles to talk to.
Hmm.
And I think that having that trusted adult is so, so important.
Hmm.
And that's really what can make a difference in someone's life.
Wow. Yeah. And then, like I said, I've got kids of my own, and sometimes they come back from school, and I'm like, well, I don't want anyone to bully you. Just always be there to tell the teacher if anything goes wrong, but also talk to the parents, talk to mom, talk to dad. Let's hear what's going on. And sometimes I know I don't want to breathe everything down their neck, come on with such immense pressure. But then I think it just questions as simple as how's school today? Did you learn anything? And just get the vibe out of what they're not even saying, because they may not say exactly what the issue is. But yeah, that's really really cool. What can I say, except thank you for an amazing chat.
Of
And
course. Thank
what
you.
exactly is so, as a way of rounding up, I've made some art, but I want to know exactly what projects you have going on at the moment. So 30 and counting, when is it going to stop? Is it ever going to stop? What's the next thing on the
I hope
horizon?
not. Right now, I am working on editing this very long novel, which I have 2 chapters released on Patreon
Yes, I
um,
heard.
every week. And I'm also working on just this new novel. It's very experimental, it's very tricky, but it's also very fun. And I'm almost done with the first draft. So,
Do you want to tell us anything about why it's experimental? You don't have to
it's
tell us the
very much
story, but
a new genre. It's like a medieval portal fantasy.
oh,
Yeah.
that's
And it's just
interesting.
it's very interesting, but it's very hard to navigate all these different mechanics and keep it in a shorter time frame. And
Wow.
then also I'm just working on a book that I have coming out releasing on June 21st. And that is a novel
Ooh.
told in poetry that is nothing like You Won't Know Her Name.
Okay.
It's about sharks. So it's very interesting. It's very sweet.
Okay. Okay. And just about the medieval fantasy you're writing at the moment. Does it have a heroine or is it a hero?
Huron.
All right. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to that. So when do you think with any of these, well, your latest projects are going to be ready and available? What's the plan? Do you have um a date in mind, or are you just one of those? Because I know that there are different kinds of authors. There are authors that put times and all of that, but there's some that just go along with the process and see how it takes them. So what's
Yeah.
it with you? Do you have something in mind in terms of a date when it will be ready?
For the medieval fantasy, probably
Yeah.
next year. For the shark poetry book, June 21st.
Oh
It
wow.
actually came out. It's available for pre-order, like as of today.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm looking forward to that actually. Okay, well, Shanti, what can I say? I'm sure you've heard this over and over again about how your story is an amazing one. But let me just say it is inspiring. And I don't understand what would, and although you've explained it, I can't comprehend how you're motivated to just keep writing. I mean, from someone who's already written two books, I know that it takes a lot of commitment, but you're still at it, and I can only expect more and greater things from you. And as we were speaking, I was making art, and I would like to show you what art I
Oh, I'm
have made.
excited.
Okay, so I call this character Lady Shanti.
Oh, that is so
So,
cool.
yeah, so this is you as a knight, and I have a shield of defense here and a sword of honor. And this is going to be fantasy like. And I know you've already mentioned that you're working on a fantasy novel, so I don't know, maybe this is a character who's going to be in it. But this is
Yeah.
exactly, well, whilst I was hearing your story and preparing for this interview, this is the kind of art that I made. One, because you are an advocate for anti bullying generally, but also you're a very talented and creative writer. So this is me saying thank you for coming on my podcast. I would love to send this to you. So I'm hoping that at some point I can send it to you together with a letter saying how amazing you are.
Oh yeah, of course. That's beautiful.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm gonna get this across to you. So can you tell us a bit anyway, for anyone who would like to follow you on your social media pages? Can you tell us where you what they should be looking at, what they should be searching for?
Of course. So you can find me first off at my website, which is shantihershenson.com. But you can also find me on TikTok, which is at Shanti Who Writes, and then my Instagram, which is at Shanti Hershenson.
All right. Well done. So there you have it, guys. The amazing Shanti Hershenson telling us about her experience as a writer, upcoming projects as well, being an advocate for anti-bullying, and it's just been an amazing experience. Thank you, Shanti, for your time. Do have a lovely day, guys, and I will see you next week.